Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Bulletproof Selling. My name is Sean Rhodes, the Chief Sales Sergeant here at Bulletproof Selling and author of the book Bulletproof Selling, a guide for systemizing sales on the battlefield of business. Here at Bulletproof Selling, we exist for one reason, and that is to remind people and to help them solve the problem of hope not being a sales strategy. Now, whether you are day one in sales or you've been in this game for 30 years, you'll know there is always room for improvement if you want to grow sales. If you're at the point where you're just writing a bunch of accounts that continue to produce all your sales for you, you're probably not listening to this type of a show. You're not actually contributing to your growth. You're not into continuous improvement as a person, as a salesperson, or as just a member here on planet Earth. But if you're listening, chances are you want to remove more hope from how you sell. So since day one, we've been bringing on guests to help us achieve that exact aim. Over the years, we've been able to have on Hall of Fame speakers, best-selling authors, folks that are out there leading and growing their own teams, and they recognize that hope is not a strategy for success in life or in sales. And out of every one of these episodes, we land on a topic with our guest and we build a system that you can use no matter the size of your team or the size of your goals. You can remove hope from that area of your sales cycle as well. And on all the folks that we've had on, there's a group of core people that are probably my favorite guests. These are our military veterans. And over the course of years, we've been able to have them on from all 5 branches, believe it or not. Did you know the Coast Guard's a military branch? It sure is. Sometimes that surprises even Coast Guard people to hear that, but yeah, they are. But I think by far my favorite folks to have on are my fellow U.S. Marines, because that's what I got to do for a while in the Marine Corps as a war correspondent, studying the highest performing teams on the battlefield, learning how they removed hope from how they operated so that I could walk into sales teams and help them remove hope from how they operated as well. And although the military is a very big place, multi-generational, hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people serving at any one time, occasionally you run into folks that were actually on the same patch of ground that you were, who got their boots dusty and sandy with the same pieces of sand. So I'm happy to have on one of those folks today, a vice president of sales that was in Iraq, same time I was, around 2004. So it's my pleasure to welcome onto the show, Mr. Daniel O'Brien. Daniel, sir, welcome to Bulletproof Selling.
Hey, Sean, good morning.
Good morning, sir. So, I didn't want to give you a full intro because I want you to share what you do and who you do it for. Talk to us a little bit about your journey in the Marine Corps and how you got into sales and who you get to serve today.
Yeah, definitely. Joined the Marine Corps back in 2000 and got the MOS Logistics Embarkation Specialist. And I remember asking the recruiter, "What does that mean?" He's like, "You're going to be the FedEx guy of the Marine Corps." And
Yep.
Fast forward 4 years, I guess 6-7 years after finishing my 4 years in the Marine Corps, going to school, my first job was with FedEx Ground in the operations management side. So funny how those things ended up connecting. But in the Marine Corps, on the logistics specialist side, our responsibilities have to do with load planning for aircraft and ships, unloading. A lot of what we did for the initial deployments and stuff like that was receiving gear overseas and distributing to units what their allocated equipment needs are. And then, in operation, once we're in stateside, managing supply chain routes and things like that, coordinating with the other branches to travel up and down the country.
And you get to do something in that realm today as well. You're not out of the world of logistics, but now you're in sales. So talk to me about who you serve and how you serve them today.
Yeah, now I'm with Simple Logistics, 3PL truckload brokerage. Our primary focus is ground transportation in the United States and working our way into some Canada, Mexico cross-border transportation services as well. We'll be looking here in the next year or so to start building out our own sales team and standing up a team that, where we can help create a process for them, those individuals, when they come in, hit the ground and be successful in, what we see in the upcoming months once we do actually stand up that team down the road.
And you drove right into it, man. So thanks for doing that. This is going to be a real punchy show. I can tell we're going to get into a lot of tactics, which is a lot of what we do here at Bulletproof Selling. So I know in the logistics world in the Marine Corps, just give you an example, and I'm sure you could come up with more than a few examples of this. We had to learn the hard way how to get stuff done. If Marines don't have, bandages and bullets at the right time and in the right place, they can't accomplish their mission. So it's up to folks like you when you were in the Marine Corps to make sure this stuff got there on time. And we learned the hard way what happens if those bullets and Band-Aids aren't there on time in World War II and Korea and Vietnam. We took those lessons and made sure that they updated our system so that we could actually get stuff to the right place at the right time. So in sales, it's very similar, right? And you mentioned something that you were standing up a new sales team. So I know you had to deal with new salespeople in the past. You've had to deal with coming into an organization that just didn't have any process because they either never built it or it was a brand new company. So no process existed. So in the experiences you've had in those areas, Daniel, tell me, what is the place that you see salespeople relying on hope? Let's say you got your 10 people hired tomorrow. They're bright and bushy tailed. They're ready to sell stuff. But where does hope enter the picture in a way that could really help them destroy their results?
I think at the very beginning, right? If you're just hoping to have a pipeline be successful and start seeing, the results you want, what the results you want are, but if you just hope to get there without having to build those steps and that kind of cadence or process is going to be that's the first lesson I learned when I got into the sales side. I necessarily wasn't on the sales side. It was just kind of just how my, career path journeyed one day to where I was like, all right, well, now I need to add business and add revenue, sooner than later. And, definitely a learning process, kind of on that side, but, getting that process, building those building blocks in place will help eliminate just hoping for the results you want versus having a plan and going out and achieving them.
And what is the value in having a process, though? Because I know a lot of salespeople, most of them, in fact, have just had to figure it out as they go. And then when they get a good pipeline, 200, 300 accounts, whatever that is for their industry, they just, kind of learn the hard way. I just got to, keep doing the same things that work for me without ever actually laying down a process for here's what I do, when I do it, and how it gets done. So what's the value in having that type of a process outside your head? Now, same reason we had it in the Marine Corps. So this is a softball question for you as a fellow Marine. What is the value of having a consistent process to execute?
I think that the value is always, you know what your next steps are and what you should be working on. If you don't have a set process, you can get real complacent and, just like, all right, well, I got a few, things in the pipeline starting to come through, and you just get kind of focused on that account management, and you're not still focused on developing that next, the next leads and, going down the line. And that can end up to, there's always things that happens with, good relationship, customer client relationships, out of your control. Maybe you don't work with them anymore. And if you're not following the process, that downtime or kind of getting a little bit too relaxed will lead to having to start over fresh, and you have nothing. And then you're right back to hoping something comes up, sooner than later, so you can keep your, sales activity where you need it to be.
That's 100% right, man. So if I'm in a situation now, just because you're a salesperson listening to this, for all the listeners and the viewers out there of the live stream, maybe you're part of an established company, but you're launching a new product. So you essentially have to build new pipeline from scratch. Today's show is going to help you. Or maybe you've dropped into a company that doesn't have a process, or you're standing one up on your own because, hey, you're a solopreneur, an entrepreneur. You know the value of sales, and you know that having a process is better than not having one. Today's show is going to help you as well. So wherever you're at, right? New product launch, new market expansion, new territory, or we're just standing one up because we've never had one before. I think what Daniel and I are going to do today is really going to help you out. So, Daniel, you remember in the Marine Corps, every time that we put a new system in place, we removed a little more hope from how we operated, so that our folks on the front line didn't have to hope they would get bullets and Band-Aids at the right spot. Same thing in sales. Every new process we put in place removes a little more hope from the sales cycle. And of course, in the military and in the Marine Corps, hey, we had an acronym for just about everything. Probably stuff we didn't need an acronym for, we would invent an acronym for. Here at Bulletproof Selling, it's the same way. So we use this acronym TRIM to develop our sales systems, because every new system trims more hope away from our sales strategy. So you're actually doing this right now. So this is going to be really relevant for you. If I'm standing up a new process because of either a new marketplace expansion, new territory, or I just don't have one and I need one, where do I trigger this system? That's the T in TRIM. Do I trigger this when I get my first set of leads? Do I trigger it when I'm developing my ICP to make sure the right leads go in? Where do you recommend I trigger a process of developing a process?
I think, at the very beginning, to build that process, right? Once you get the leads or choose where you're going to generate leads and those sources, is you want to have those steps and that cadence already in place. So when you do bring on those lead generation tools, you have, you're starting to use them and maximize the value, because those tools cost money. And as soon as you start generating and bringing in those leads and that effort, if you just start your planning process, then you're going to fall out. It's going to slow you down. You're going to lose some productivity in areas where you should already be moving forward or through the sales cycle, qualification, lead qualification, things like that.
And so talk to me a little bit about lead qualification, because I feel like that's going to be the step in between the triggering element and the R in TRIM, which is making this a repeatable process. If I'm standing up a process, do I need to be concerned with whether they're qualified leads going into this funnel or not? and how do I qualify them? What advice would you have for a salesperson standing that up?
Definitely, I think you need to have an internal search to see what you're good at, what your team's expertise and y'all's abilities to execute for a customer and identify what that customer looks like. Same way you have vendor scorecards, you want to have a perfect customer scorecard and find those metrics that, hey, we know if we find these individuals, our skill set matches up with their needs and it'll be a good fit ahead of time. So when you have that kind of ideal customer scorecard built out, you can know as you go to qualify these leads, you can match them up to that and say, yeah, this is definitely someone or somewhere I think we should be spending that time to qualify candidates and begin that conversation and hopefully from there build a long-term relationship.
Awesome, man. Awesome. So if I've got my triggers in place, I know to do this before these leads drop in my lap. Because like you said, the worst place to figure out what to do on a sales call is in the sales call. Same thing in logistics in the Marine Corps. The worst thing to figure out what to do with all these supplies is when the supplies are dropped in our lap and they have an expiration date on them and they're needed 40 miles forward on the line. That's a pretty crappy time to figure out how to move them there. So when we move into the RN trim, I want to make this repeatable so that as I stand up a new sales process, I can then do it when we're expanding into a new market segment next quarter or next year when we have to hire not just 10 people, but 50 people, and I've got to train them up. So what are the 3 or 4 or 5 steps that you would recommend we go through in standing up a sales process, developing those pipeline verticals, figuring out what the qualifications are for each of them? How would you recommend that we stand this process up so I can make it repeatable? What are those steps?
Definitely. I think, starting with that, get, internal, look and say, hey, what's our success? What do we want to be? And then pick kind of a vertical or geographic target locations and assign those. So we know that we're going to focus on the South Central U.S. Gulf Coast region, and we're going to look for these type of prospects that meet these 4 criteria, and then look at that and then make sure that matches up with our strength, and then we have that in place. Run through that for your first quarter as you stand up your team for that market, and then look at that, kind of do an after action report. We look back, where was our successes and failures? How can we do that? Tune up the process a little bit, and then look to grow into other areas and regions, depending on how we split those verticals or target markets up.
And we're going to go deep into the after action process because that's going to be important here. So I want to make sure that I'm covering a couple more things inside the repeatable cycle. So if I've got defining success, and each company is going to be different, every market's going to be different, but you're looking at some basics like geography, industries, size of company, anything else that would meet that criteria for how I determine of all the leads that I have available, which are the ones I should prioritize, which are the ones I should really put some effort into. And the second step you mentioned was, hey, now that you've got all these criteria in place, make sure they're aligned with what you consider to be success. Just because you can sell something to these people doesn't mean that you should. So look at where your company is trying to grow. What does success look like at the end of this year? What type of accounts, if you could wave that magic wand and fill your pipeline with your ideal type of customer, what would those customers have in common? Because those are the people I want to prioritize in my outreach. But if I've got those at least identified as far as who I should be reaching out to, talk to me a little bit about maybe steps 3 and 4 in this, which is developing that sales cycle. Because I want to make sure as you're growing out your 10 new salespeople, which could turn into 50, could turn into 100, that I can look at their sales cycle at a glance and know that, hey, these folks are on the right track to success. They're not getting bottlenecked in the early stages, or they're not bottlenecked with a bunch of proposals out with no chance of closing. So how do I begin to develop some verticals in my sales cycle so that as a sales leader, I know when I'm hiring these people in and they start outreach, they're moving in the right direction?
Definitely. I think that's going to go into your lead qualification process and how you want to have your team consistently, on their, outreach or marketing campaigns to individual accounts that we've already identified that should be a good fit from what we know on the outside in. In the lead qualification, we kind of take it from a lead to a contact, and that's once we've identified that lead is a good fit for us. And you're going to do that by researching the company, look on the individual's background. LinkedIn's a great tool. And say, hey, look, are there any, similarities? I always look for, some kind of veteran connection. Or school connection, things like that. And, kind of having that pre-homework done. So as we've already moved to that first qualification from a lead to an actual contact, you have some, groundwork in, and that way when those conversations, and then whether they be on a Zoom meeting or face-to-face or over the phone, you've already established, so, hey, there's a little bit of background, a little fit, and then when they have the conversation, right? Ultimately, we want to keep the conversation going and get to learn about their needs, what they look for day to day, and where there can be a place to add value.
That's awesome. And so if I'm defining my stages by lead qualification, obviously the early stage might look like, from what I can see online, they look qualified. Stage two might be I've done a little bit more research on that person individually. There are some things that I could use to develop rapport with. Veteran connection. We went to school at the same place. I've helped companies like theirs before. We've got a track history. And I imagine a couple of those later stages would be, developed a conversation. So we've actually talked to this human being. We further qualified them, maybe got a proposal out, or whatever that next step in your sales process is. So if you define your pipeline by those stages, then as a salesperson, where do I need to put in effort this week? All right, where am I seeing some stuff begin to back up that I can begin to move forward? So that's where I need to put my effort and my attention, instead of just, I've got 500 accounts, I'm just going to work my dashboard from top to bottom, which is one of the more inefficient ways to work a sales process. So if I've gotten these steps in place, then Daniel, trigger element, repeatable element, the iron trim is making this improvable. And this is to that after action that you mentioned. So how am I going to after action this after, let's say I've got my 10 people in place, they've been hired, they've been onboarded, they've been making calls, doing outbound against this process for a quarter, let's say. What am I going to look at the end of the quarter to determine, hey, is this thing really working? What am I going to use to improve this system?
Definitely. I think, kind of at the end of a first quarter from a very, brand new organic sales team standing up, we want to start seeing that first quarter. We want to see that kind of the final parts of that, sales cycle closing, where we're onboarding new business relationships into some kind of bid or RFP system with them, to actually seeing the final step, right? Freight on dock, getting that first shipment for us and on the transportation side. And that's where we want to start seeing generating, and then looking at which individuals on your team are generating, those results. And if, they're not, why? Or do we go back and review our KPIs? I think it's important to have KPIs that, give the individuals the tools to be successful with those KPIs, and they make sense. Things, a lot of times on the sales side, we see this, your new sales rep, you need to hit this number, this bar, this time. And people kind of get focused on that side versus, kind of having a step-by-step, much like what we want to see in the first 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, and beyond. And, that's where we want to, after the first 3 months, is go back. What did we do? What did we put in place? Why were the successes successful? Where we could have done better? Where could we improve? And maybe it's adjusting targets or adjusting KPIs, but that's where we would be looking at after 3 months.
And in this conversation right now, Daniel, is why I love having veterans on, because you already understand this process innately, because it's exactly what you were taught to do in the military. So you've already moved me into the final element of trim, which is the M, in measuring. And I love what you said. So I'm gonna recap it as best I can, and then please dive deeper into it. You advise for a new sales team, you do need to measure end results. How many sales did we push through? But because it's a new sales team and a new process, you mentioned tracking progress through the process. Not necessarily how many sales did we close, because maybe I'm in an industry where this is an 18-month sales cycle. So what am I going to do inside of a quarter to know that we're making progress? Well, it's to measure progress along the process. So if you're leading that sales team, let's say, Daniel, now 10 people, next quarter, you're looking back on the results and you're measuring them. How are you going to measure progress along the process rather than just closed deals?
Definitely. I think technology plays a big part of it now. You're getting the tools in place for you to look at each of those steps, whether it's initial email campaigns, phone calls, on-site visits, things like that, and see where the connections either broke or continued. And you can, a lot of times with those tools, see, hey, this individual had X number of calls and outbound emails, and set so many meetings, and kind of compare that, benchmark it to the other team members, and see where more of the success or failure is coming from. So we know how to coach it up. On the other side, right? We see, these individuals who may not have the same results, but they're doing the same activity. All right, that might just be a coaching tool, or, maybe we need to add something to their tool belt so they're more successful, and figure that, that side out.
Man, with that type of logical process, and developing that before you're in the midst of the day-to-day, dealing with, deals that are about to fall through, upset prospects, even customers that now need something from you from last year that you have to divert attention to because they're potential sources of future business. All of that stuff, all those fires that you have to put out, they're going to keep happening. But with a process in place, you will not have to wing it in your new business development. And that, I think, is the beauty of having this type of a process in place and building one, whether you're expanding a new product line, moving into new territory, expanding your market, or, as is the case with your company right now, Daniel, standing up a new team. So I want to make sure this stuff is in place so that they don't move into an area with no plan, no map, no idea where to go, because they will scattershot their results as the result. And I know you know that from your time in the Marines. So end-to-end system, man. We've got all things knocked out in record time. I'd love to hear from you. Where do people need to go if they're interested in being one of those 10 salespeople you're hiring, or to learn more about your company?
Yeah, you have Simple Logistics, our website at simplelgx.com, or you can also on my LinkedIn, Daniel O'Brien on that side. Definitely reach out. A lot of marketing, a lot of it, engagement, goes through LinkedIn as well as that side. So I say that would be the first two places to start.
That's amazing. We'll make sure that we're linking you when this goes out on LinkedIn as well. So please connect with Daniel. If you're in sales and you love the way that he thinks and this system that he's already probably going to have built out for you when you start, definitely connect with him, get your resume in. For us here at Bulletproof Selling, if you're catching us on the live stream, make sure you're subscribing to that YouTube channel. Or if you're listening on iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, anywhere that podcasts can be found, best thing you can do for us, leave us a review. Let other salespeople know. Hope no longer has to be part of their sales strategy, whether you're standing up a new product line or you are just building a process for an existing one. Relying on hope is not the way to go. And so now you have a system to use. Well, Daniel, thanks so much for your service to our country. Thanks for giving back to the sales community today. I know you're very service-oriented or you wouldn't be here. Let's get out there, brother. Let's make selling bulletproof.
Definitely. Thanks, Sean. I appreciate it.